Hi, welcome to Kitchen Chats. I am your host, Aimee Kandrac, and today I have a new friend with me, Steve Nichols. And Steve is the Integrative Veterinary Clinic owner and head vet. Um,
Well, up until just recently, the vet. So.
oh, well, that works as well.
Exactly.
So thanks for joining me this morning. We're going to talk about animals during crisis.
Sure.
But first, I like to always ask every guest who joins me in my kitchen if they have a kitchen moment
Sure.
that they'd be willing to share.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. It's very nice to come down and be a part of this. Hopefully, I'll have something significant to offer.
I'm sure.
So, from my standpoint, there's a couple that come into play. One, in about 10 years ago, my best friend was diagnosed with cancer, and he had to go to Washington State for essentially a stem cell replacement procedure that was kind of unique. And he had to leave the state, obviously, and in doing that, he left behind his dogs, his two boys, and his mom came up from Florida to take care of everything. So the gist of the story basically goes that he and I basically had this ritual, and with his wife as well, that my wife and we would get together on Sunday mornings for breakfast or brunch. And we kept that ritual going with his mom. And it was a way to kind of stay in touch with what was going on with him, because communication was very difficult in terms of, you think 10 years ago, really it's not that long ago, but, we didn't do as much texting and emailing and that kind of stuff. And he literally was worn out from what was going on. So from my perspective, it allowed us to kind of keep that connection there. And unfortunately, while he was out in Washington State, one of his dogs became very sick one night and had to go to the ER. And yeah, it's a whole tearjerker story here, because he contacted me, called me relatively late at night, and asked me to go down to the ER and euthanize his dog.
Oh,
because of the connection that he had to me and that I had to the dog. So, obviously I did it. And it's one of those things where, again, the vulnerability of him asking me to do it, and then also, being able to convince the folks at the ER that my friend was really sick and he needed me to do this, because that's kind of outside protocol. But thankfully, the folks at MedVet were willing to allow me to do that and come in and help in the transition. So that's one.
Sure.
And that was, impactful to me. And then also, well, I should follow that up with, he was gone for almost 8-9 months.
Oh my gosh, that's a really long time.
Exactly. And so I had a big birthday in 2013 and he came, and as you can tell, it was a big thing for me to have my friend back. So yeah.
Oh, what a special connection.
Yeah. So to fast forward to 2021, we were getting ready to open our clinic in Westfield. And the Friday before Memorial Day, I found out that the person that we had tabbed to be our practice manager had decided to go a different direction. So I was like, ooh, we're getting ready to open here in a couple of weeks. That's not really great, but we'll try to sort through it. My wife and I had to have our own little kitchen table moment about that, right?
Oh, yeah,
and
probably a really big one.
Yeah, and try to sort through what that was going to look like. And then, unfortunately, on Memorial Day, while I was going in and just trying to organize some things in the clinic, became very painful, very uncomfortable. And after 3 ER visits that week, found out that I was septic.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So that was a very interesting time for me, because I then became the one that was tremendously vulnerable and had to ask people to do things that I was really not comfortable doing. I mean, you think about, you think about the week before, I would have had no problem doing all the things that I was now asking people to do for me. I could hardly walk 10 feet without being exhausted. So, it is one of those eye openers. My wife, my best friend, Katie, she stepped in. She came in, helped get people organized. I had to entrust people that had very little experience working in a veterinary clinic to help, right? I mean, I had no choice. I was laying flat on my back in bed. So it was one of those times where, as I talked about vulnerability and the fact that sometimes, even though you have a very clear concept of the way things are going to go, God, universe, however you want to look at it, has a totally different concept of what that's going to look like.
Extra lessons for you before. You think you're opening something now? Yes. Great.
Mr. Big Pants, right?
Yeah, not going that way.
Yeah. So it was very interesting to see the growth in these young people that were then forced to do things that they had no idea what they were doing. And, some are still with us at the clinic, some are not. But I do owe a profound bit of thanks to all of them because of what they were able to do in that moment. And the headshot that I sent to you for the podcast is at our open house. And that's only about 2 weeks removed from when I was released from the hospital. Yeah. I was a crazy idiot. I thought that I could go back to work the next day.
Well, of course.
And found out rather quickly that, no, this is going to take a while. And it did take probably about 5 months before I really felt like myself again. So again, another one of those experiences where people gathered around. I really wasn't in that kitchen moment as interjected as probably I would like to have been, but others came in, they figured it out, they got me through it. And, thankfully now the clinic is humming along and it's very successful, and it's thanks to those folks. So. And
I know you and your wife have some pets of your own.
Yes.
So that probably also meant, I'm making some assumptions here, that there's probably like joint care in most of these pets, or at least you took part in some of that. So all of a sudden, you're opening, your new practice, you're in the hospital, so you're actually not doing any of the things that you would usually do around the house even. Sure.
So she had to be it, right? She had to be it there. She had to be it at the clinic, and she had to be it in her job. So from that perspective, there was a lot just kind of dumped on her all at once. And, it was amazing that she literally got me through that first couple of months because it was a lot to take on.
Yeah.
And we had friends that certainly stepped in. I mean, we had the open house. A good friend, Judy Cohen, helped organize that for us because, again, our office manager person was supposed to be doing that, right? And we're like, and Judy kept asking us questions. And I was like, Judy, right now, please just take it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to spend a lot of money, let me know. But, from the standpoint of do it. And she did, and she did a great job. And, again, it was a time that kind of rejuvenated me, I guess was the word that I was looking for, to have those clients that I really hadn't had interaction with for a while, to have that one-on-one. And even though it was a long day and I was very tired at the end of it, it was worth being there and having that experience.
Oh, good.
So, yeah.
Good.
So I think that we might have got it a little diverted there in terms of your actual question, but.
No, it's okay. Well, what I really want us to be able to talk about today, and I think this is a great starting off point, is you've had these crises in your life, and when your friend called in the middle of the night with the dog, there's a lot of different things that can happen. But whenever there's a crisis in your life, your pets know. Your pets feel a difference in the way that you're living in your house.
Sure.
Or you're not living in your house.
Sure.
And And so I just want us to be able to talk about, what do we as friends, what can we do to help ease that stress for both the owner and the pet?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think the things that come into play are multifactorial there, right? I mean, you've got the dynamic of how the human and the pets,
Right.
The human sees the relationship and how the pet sees the relationship, and sometimes it's diametrically opposite, right? I mean, the pet's like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest human on the planet," and the human's like, "Yeah, I like my dog, but it's not." Thankfully, that's very rare.
Oh, that's definitely how my cats see me. Yeah. I'm the best one in the house. And I know that I'm the best one in the house because I'm the first one that feeds them every morning.
Exactly. Well,
but there are other people in my house who think that the cats are their favorites. Anyway, go ahead.
No, that human animal bond is so strong, right? I mean, and it's both ways. And we think about the impact on the people, and certainly if they're going something through that's a major crisis, that in and of itself, it's like, okay, I just want to check out from the world sometimes, right? Depending upon the how significant it is or how severe it is. The dog has a hard time understanding checking out.
Right.
The dog is used to its routine, or the cat's used to its routine, and the horse is used to its routine. And whenever that is broken, they're like, they're lost, for lack of a better word. And so then we can start to see, depending upon how long it lasts. I mean, if you go for vacation for a week, you've got people coming in taking care. That's one thing. But if you've got a significant disease process that's going on, or God forbid somebody passes, and now that bond is broken permanently, it's very hard on our furry friends. I mean, they grieve sometimes differently than what we would think they would, but some stop eating, some start vocalizing when they never vocalized before, some will hide. So there's all of this dynamic that can be going on with these folks with our friends, that may require veterinary intervention, may not. But I think that being keen to trying to keep the routine as best we can, if we're friends trying to come in and help,
right,
is one of the best things that we can. We can't replace the bond,
right.
At least not initially, but we can try to do things that are going to allow that bond to try to stay as close to normal as it can for the pet. So that may mean interaction in terms of walking them as you talked about. Sometimes it's just setting with them. I mean, sometimes, we talk about holding space for a lot of different things, right? But sometimes just holding space for the animal in the presence of the owner will sometimes, the dog will appreciate the fact that you're petting them, even though the owner can't. So.
Right. So I think reminding friends that if your friend gives you a schedule for your pet, trying to be as appreciative and aware of keeping as close to that as possible.
Sure.
I don't expect someone to come over at 7:15 and feed my cats.
Sure.
But my sister's dogs cannot handle going too much later than that. That's like right.
Their clock is going off.
Their clock is going off. But saying, okay, this is kind of what this dog is used to, or this cat is used to, or I don't know a lot about horses, but trying to keep that as same as possible. I do know that during the pandemic, my son got really into fish. And so we now have 2 aquariums in our house, a 125 gallon and a 30 gallon. And they like to be fed at a really specific time.
Sure, and they bond too.
Oh, they bond too. They actually, they follow us around the room. It's kind of funny. And one of them, really likes my son. I can see, he's always around with that one.
This is the irony of having conversations, right? So the experience I was telling you about my best friend, big fish guy.
Oh, that's
big fish guy.
Of course.
Yeah. So.
Well, and our cats are bonded to my daughter, and bonded to each other in different ways.
Sure.
So I know when we go out of town or when she left for college, it was really hard for them. They didn't even know where to sleep.
Yeah. So cats are even a little bit more difficult, right?
Most of the time.
Yeah. So I had a mentor a long time ago that was a specialist in feline medicine that said that jumping into the psyche of a cat is a very difficult proposition. They're a very dangerous proposition. Because, you think that, you can have a reasonable thought process through them, and much like you would maybe with a dog, and you go like, okay, the dog gets it. The cat's like, I don't live by your rules. I mean, I don't have to do this.
I don't have to do
this. And so the hard part with cats becomes the whole, litter box elimination thing. And, again, if they're stressed, right? We talk about, I mean, goodness sakes, for the human, the stress that's going on, that's experiencing that, but the pet as well. And so the pet's going to have these increased cortisol levels, and they're going to maybe be freaking out because of that. And then we get all these weird things that manifest, right? In dogs, like we talked about, sometimes it maybe they're not eating. It can result in upper GI stuff, kind of like us when you're stressed, your belly starts bothering you. With cats, oddly enough, it's their urinary bladder. And who would have thunk? And so then you've got that loveliness, right? That maybe somebody that is bedridden, that's having somebody come in 3 or 4 times a day, they're trying to figure out what's going on and how to cope with that. So again, if those things start happening, I would encourage getting that pet to the veterinarians or to their veterinarian so that they can maybe come up with some things that will help alleviate some of that stress and help get that anxiety down.
And I'm just glad that we're talking about that, because I think that is something that I know I sometimes forget because I'm the doer and the organizer. So I'm like, okay, I'm not walking your dog because I will throw up if I pick up their dog poop. But I will, I'm not kidding. Anyway, but I'll organize for everybody to go and get all of these things done.
Sure.
But I forget how much stress the pet is going through.
It is physiologic, right?
Right.
But there's so much emotion tied to it, and it is one of those things where you start looking at all the things that can start happening because of increased cortisol levels, and the list is longer than my arm. And so, they, meaning our pets, a lot of times are sponges of our emotion and the stuff that we're going through, right? And there's sometimes when you just kind of scratch your head, you find out that the owner's maybe has, let's say, a liver issue, right? And then you go to do blood work on the dog, and you're like, oh my God, this dog has liver issues. And so you're like, well, how is that going on? Is there something in the environment, or is there something along those lines? And you try to play, little junior detective sometimes, but sometimes it's just literally, I believe, which gets a little wet right brain and woohoo, right? I believe that those animals are trying to help diffuse what's going on in that person. I know that probably just discredited me with you, but
no, I love it. I really love it. And I think that makes so much sense. And looking at the pets that I've had in my life and how they've behaved and different behaviors that have happened as different people in our family have had things go on.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and you see how the little nuances, like we talked about a little bit earlier, how you may have a relationship with this pet and your sister has a different relationship with this pet, and around you, that whole interaction and their whole life is different.
So I almost started crying a few minutes ago when you were sharing something, because it reminded me that the dog we had when my dad died, his name was Luke, and he was like, we got him when we were in high school, but then we'd gone off to college, and he was my dad's dog. And when my dad died, my mom had to move very shortly after that. And Luke ended up staying with the house. And the new owners, because he was so attached to that. And I, like, I was young, so I wasn't quite, and had my own grieving going on. But looking back, I can see how in grief the dog was,
Sure.
and the attachment to the house.
Well, that's where he knew your dad, right?
Right.
In that space.
In that space.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot I feel like I've seen it a lot, like where pets will go find where their owner is buried, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole weird, unexplainable stuff, right? Where we get into the whole.
It is maybe unexplainable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think it's weird because there's some people that will just kind of dismiss it offhand and just say, "Oh, well, it's just a fluke." I don't believe that. I mean, when they go and lay, like you said, where in the recliner that maybe your dad was in, right? Or, my father-in-law, had a favorite recliner and a chair, and so the dog would go there, right? Because they knew that was a connection that they could try to reestablish. And I think energetically for them, I think there is something about, that space that allows them to kind of feel it again.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I like to get into some of the nitty gritty. So what are any tips that you have for someone who is going into a house to take care of someone else's pet?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, I think you've pointed out in previous podcasts, is just being respectful. I mean, the hard part is you're coming into somebody's house, you're trying to help them out with something. Maybe it's not, again, as we talked about with me in the clinic, maybe it's not exactly the way you would have things set up and the way you do things, but try to stay on task and try to not make it better according to you. Try to understand that this is the way that they've been doing it. This is the way that the pet understands it. And if you come in and you try to put your own spin on it, it's great that you're willing to help, but I think it just creates more confusion and potentially more stress. It's like the person that comes in and says, "I don't know why the litter box is here. The litter box should be over here."
Oh gosh, that would be the worst thing ever.
Exactly, right. And I mean, if they're a cat person coming in and taking care of cats, they're probably not going to do that. But Uncle, the staff always joke that it's always somebody named Fred. And I'm sorry if Freds are listening.
Oh, sorry, Fred. I don't.
Uncle Fred comes in. He's like, "Oh, this litter box needs to be over here," right? And so we have the potential to create problems if we don't stick to what's been going on in the household.
So often I think something that can be done easily is like people with kids can offer to go take someone's dog on a walk, or can go over and feed the fish or turtle or whatever. But what is that good? Is that helpful?
I think it is, as long as, again, there's those boundaries that are set up, right? You have to understand that obviously you want somebody that's responsible to be able to come in and do those type of things.
Right.
And if the dog's not used to going to a dog park or those type of things, probably taking them there is not going to be necessarily the best thing to do. Now, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just thinking you want to have that conversation with that owner. Hey, I'm thinking about taking Scruffy down to the dog park. Has he ever been down there before? Does he enjoy doing that? Oh no, Scruffy hates other dogs. Because even in the clinic environment, we have to sometimes, okay, you go that way, we'll go that way, because we do have some patients that really just don't like other pets. And so you have to get that information. You have to feel comfortable about that. I do think that, again, staying on routine with that as best you can, which sometimes is difficult, right? I mean, you may be used to taking your dog for a walk at 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's probably not something that you're going to probably have a friend come in and do.
Right.
But maybe that 3 o'clock walk or that 7 o'clock walk.
And there might also be a dog walker who you can hire to come in and do that.
Exactly. So I think that's where you kind of come into a really good idea, right? Because you've got somebody that's used to having that interaction, knows kind of the P's and Q's, so to speak, of what is supposed to happen whenever you come to somebody's door, get their dog, and take them for a walk, and what that interaction is supposed to look like. Versus somebody that's, if you want to call it raw, has no experience doing it, getting drugged down potentially, right?
Right. That would not go so well.
Yeah.
We are really fortunate that we have an older relative who has a dog, and when she goes down to Florida, has a dog walker, and the dog walker comes 2 or 3 times a day, and it's actually amazing because she checks in on our relative also. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. And so you have this additional point of,
oh, absolutely.
Oh, wait, Bonnie's not out of bed. That means Nancy's not out of bed either.
Sure.
Or something's going on. So that early morning routine can be really nice, especially with an older loved one, who might need some extra support.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, but I think that the dog walkers are used to that earlier morning experience too, right? In those situations, so they understand what that's going to be looking like. So so I think certainly having the pros come in and do it, I think is probably the best way to go if you're talking about early morning or late at night. But during the day, I think as long as it's within the parameters that the owner has set forth, I think and I think that's important too, right? We, again, that vulnerability of being okay to say, my dog's really great, but he's not so great around other dogs, right? So that, some people don't feel comfortable sharing that information, which of course then just creates another potential problem. So I think as long as everybody's honest and open about those things, I think it works out much, much better than if we're just saying, oh, I've showed up, I'm here to walk your dog, and, really have no clue what that looks like.
Right.
And certainly daycare. I mean, daycare has become more and more in vogue over the last probably 5 to 10 years. And I think that those environments are great. The only thing that I would say is when you look into helping somebody to, again, interject their dog into daycare, is those parameters that we just talked about. Is it a dog that is going to be okay in that environment?
Right. And have they had their, don't they have their vaccines, like the kennel cough? Are you going to create more stress for them in the long run?
Sure.
But doggy daycare for some would be, I mean, my sister has 2 large dogs, and one of them, I mean, doggy daycare, he would just be like, a friend. And I mean, he would be so excited. And then the other one, she would be like, do I really have to see another dog right now? She gets along with them, but she doesn't really need to see them.
I think that's great feedback, right? So let's say you set up again, with the owner's permission, you set up some daycare options. You want to have, if the daycare is not interviewing the dog, which sounds kind of strange, but if they're not, interviewing the dog in terms of seeing who they get along with, or do they get along with others, you probably don't want to go there, because you need an environment where that they're going to be watched and that they're safe, and that you're not throwing them in with 70 other dogs and, they're like, hey, look, it's the new kid. And then, something untoward happens. So we want to avoid that. And I think then the other feedback that comes in is that, this is the 3rd time you're going. Is the dog plastered in the back of the car and not wanting to get out once you get there? Pick up on those clues. I mean, that's some information that they're trying to communicate to you that, hey, I know you all think this is a great idea, but I don't. And then you're going to just have to work to find some other ways to make that happen. And sometimes, again, to help facilitate what is a stressful situation, there may be either supplements or medications or something like that may help that pet do better. And so if it's very apparent that anxiety level is up, those type of things, there's a myriad of things that can at least be discussed to try to help with that.
So do you recommend, if a family's going through a long-term crisis and they've got pets, is it good to actually, it just didn't occur to me until just now, should we be calling the vet to say, hey, we've got some pretty significant stuff going on in our house. Is there anything we need to do differently for our pets? Or
I think it doesn't hurt to touch base. I mean, hopefully you have a relationship with your veterinarian in which they can go, oh yeah, we probably need to see this one, and we may want to go ahead and get some stuff started. And I'm not talking about hardcore drugs or anything like that. I'm just talking about maybe even, some pheromones or some essential oils. I know that gets a little right brain for some too, but just something in the household. Just it might even help the people in there, right? If we've got some essential oils going in, just to kind of mellow everybody out just a little bit if the tension's high.
Well, and then your pet can provide the emotional support that you want from them as well.
Exactly.
Steve, there's so many more things I would love to touch on with this, but we're getting close to our time. So I want to ask you two final questions.
Oh, of course.
The two final questions. And the first one is, when you have a friend or loved one going through any kind of crisis, what is your favorite thing to do for them?
Yeah, so that's one that's been really hard for me. I mean, I'm really accessible to my clients, and we develop a friendship as it relates to that. So I think that my accessibility is my gift to people. I think that's not a very specific thing.
But it's your best friend being able to call you in the middle of the night to euthanize this dog.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing for me, quite honestly. I mean, there were others that kind of popped into my head, but I think that accessibility and we talked about holding space during euthanasia. The hard part sometimes is my profession has one of the highest suicide rates right now, and the problem that comes into play is just the stress of what we do, our desire to make things better, and then the euthanasia aspect of things. The other thing that we do in terms of a gift is that, and people have different mindsets on euthanasia, and I appreciate their stance on that, but to be there and hold space and support somebody that's made an end-of-life decision for their pet, and to do that without judgment is important.
That's a really huge thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
So the final question.
Yes.
What is the best thing anyone has ever done for you when you've gone through a life event?
Well, I mean, we talked about the sepsis. I mean, I think that, what my wife did in that short period of time, in terms of when you look at it over a lifetime, but it seemed like it was going on forever, right? It was again multifactorial. It wasn't just necessarily one thing, but to know she had it. Yeah. She had it, and that I didn't have to. Okay, I got to hurry up and get out of here because, of course, she was wanting me to stay in the hospital longer and not go to work when I did. However,
because if you were in the hospital, you couldn't go to work.
Yeah. But what she did for me, and kind of sacrificing what she would probably have rather been doing, to help. This clinic's been a dream of mine forever. And it's just finally come to fruition in the latter half of my life, right? And so to be at the precipice of being able to grab it and just feeling like it was slipping through my fingers, and then have somebody catch it, that was huge, huge.
Well, Steve, thank you so much. It has really been a pleasure to chat with you. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. You as well.